Greetings and welcome to Growth Hacking Secrets. I'm your host, Muhammad Siddique from Atlanta, Georgia, and the co-author of New Success Secrets available on Amazon. On this very special episode, I have my guest, which have been after him, looking at him for months, and finally he is on today. And myself and my team has done 2 weeks of at least homework to figure out what's the secret to his success. Remember, our show name is the Growth Hacking Secrets. So we need to. I end up in meeting some amazing people who are using his platform, Matchmakers.fm, and they are producing amazing results. Before even I bring him on, because I wanted to kind of verify. I do not trust and verify at the same time. That's a key model. Do not trust anybody, including me. Do not trust me, because that's why I bring successful people. So that created so much excitement. In fact, that's why we want to have a little bit deep dive and little longer version of this one. I apologize if you are always expecting a 15 minutes from me. This one maybe a few minutes longer. How many few more minutes you will find out later once it's finished, because it's a live. So please join me to give a warm welcome to our guest, James Mulvany. James is the founder of Matchmaker.fm. That's a connecting guests with the podcast. That's like a matchmaker in a heaven almost, because as a podcast host, the single most issue in running a successful podcast is get a consistent quality of guests on your shows. That's the number one issue. You may not know this. However, on the guest sites, their frustration is how can I connect with the podcast host so I can pass on, deliver my message and share with the world. With the relevant podcast on the relevant podcast, they have to search a lot of that's a big pain. There are a number of other platforms. However, the Matchmaker is the largest one so far. What I have found out, because I'm on all other platforms, I got a lot more guest requests from matchmakers than other competing platforms. So there's a room for everyone. I'm not against. I like all of them. However, on this one, we are speaking about Matchmakers.fm and the founder of. Please join me to give a warm welcome to James Mulvany. James, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Excellent. How about you? Thank you so much. First of all, my salute to you. Hats off creating a platform which really solve a challenge that the community is having.
Yeah, thanks, Siddique. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So, James, let me start with this. Where were you? What happened? Who you were surrounded with that inspired you to create a platform like Matchmakers? You are multiple platform. I don't know which one I should mention. Matchmaker.fm, podcast.co, and the radio.co. So
Yeah.
you are
Well,
everywhere.
I'll start at the beginning. I was when I was 16 years old. I was a kid growing up. I just finished school. I always loved listening to the radio, and I was like, I want to be that guy who's behind the microphone. I want to be the guy who's on the radio. So that's kind of like where my career initially began. I kind of started going and getting work experience, working for local radio stations, and I remember walking into a radio studio for the first ever time and just being like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. I was like a kid who loved computers, and of course you go into a radio studio and they have like 6 screens and they have like lots of buttons and dials and switches, microphones, and it was just like total like a multi-sensory overload for me. So I was like, oh my goodness, this is exciting. Being on the radio is exciting, and the idea that you can kind of broadcast to someone, that they can listen to you. I just found that whole process really fascinating. And I think, from then I went off to university. I studied interactive multimedia, and whilst I was at university, I built a business selling to the radio industry. So I decided, rather than going into the radio industry as kind of like on-air talent behind the microphone, I kind of fused that with that interest with my interest for building websites, and I was kind of learning to code as well at the time. And I started a company called Wave Streaming, and from that evolved into radio.co, which we launched in 2015. That's been really successful. And then more recently, we've launched podcast.co, and then about a year ago, matchmaker.fm, which is like kind of my new baby, if you like. And Matchmaker's just been an incredible journey. I think we'll probably be talking about that most today, but Matchmaker, we've just hit the 20,000 user mark, which is grown at an astronomical rate. I think I remember when we launched Matchmaker, we were thinking, oh yeah, if we could get to 1,000 users, that would be great. And then it was like, oh, suddenly 5,000, then 10,000, now 20,000. Now we've got our site set on 100,000, and beyond. So it's been a fantastic journey. But I think throughout my career, I've always been interested in audio and how you can use audio to connect people together.
Wonderful. So you are from a radio and a podcast and a matchmaker. Now there's something called Clubhouse. I'm sure you heard it.
Yeah,
Everybody is
yeah.
talking about. So how that has impacted or is going to impact this radio thing and online audio?
I don't know. I mean, I think Clubhouse at the moment is one of these things, isn't it? It's like there's a lot of hype around it. I think it's kind of it's interesting that people are using audio now as a tool to communicate. Twitter have launched something called Twitter Spaces, which is a direct response to Clubhouse, which I think obviously is interesting because, Twitter's always been that sort of short form communication that encourages the communication between people as well. So like it's a platform Twitter as a platform has always been for discussions, not just for like, sending out messages. It's been for like encouraging debate. Clubhouse I think is grown really big in kind of the online world. I don't know how much use it's got in the real world. I think currently, like a lot of people who are on it are obviously entrepreneurs or marketing folk or people perhaps who are sort of like really into the sort of nerdy stuff. But then if you look at the early adopters of Twitter, it was very much the same. So who knows? Maybe it'll become a mainstream thing. I think currently it's one of these things that's there's a lot of hype around it, but it's just for those kind of different communities online, like people who are really into the tech. But I think the good thing about Clubhouse is it's audio, and I'll be honest, I've got an account. I've not spent a lot of time on it yet. So
Yeah,
how about you?
Me too. I have the same ID, so at least you get the ID. All the marketers, they get the ID, so that way the brand stays there, and that's it. I never really done much. I'm like a few days ago, I just joined it. So.
But then again, I think podcasting itself is become so mainstream over the past couple of years. It's a really exciting space to be in, and I think that's not going to go anywhere. There's too many people who are now listening and engaging with podcasts. I think the disadvantage to podcasts is a very one-way form of communication. It's just you record your episode, you push it out there. There's no real feedback loop for your listeners to comment on it unless you're posting on other third-party platforms, such as YouTube or LinkedIn, etc. So I think that's kind of what the Clubhouse is filling that gap, isn't it? It's allowing you to kind of cause more of a discussion rather than just having like a one-way form of communication.
And that will in fact authenticate the audios. Like old as new now. The radio used to be, the Clubhouse is like a live radio basically. That's what that is everything. In fact, both ways,
I think radio is another interesting one because we saw a huge during lockdown, for example. It's probably like March, April, May last year. We saw a massive increase in sign-ups on our radio platform. We also saw a huge increase in listeners, tuning into our clients' radio stations. I think radio is still here to stay. I think it's got a certain place in people's hearts, and I think it's, they used to say like, oh, when TV first came along, oh, radio's going to die, and it didn't, and then the internet it's still ever present. So I think there's always going to be a place for radio, but I think Clubhouse is just all these kind of social media platforms, just like audio is a more convenient way of communicating sometimes than having like a video call. It's a more natural way of communicating. I think it's just like having a conversation, isn't it? But bringing it online.
Yeah, understood. James, in all these, you are pretty young and you have done multiple ventures projects. And there are so many successes, and I'm sure there are so many lessons you learned. We call it a failure, we call it a lesson learned, whatever.
Absolutely.
So let's start from the failures one, because that's the real wisdom comes from what not to do. So my question what are the top 3 missteps to avoid, aka mistakes to launch a platform like Matchmaker or radio or podcast or any other venture?
I'd say like my top 3 that I've written down here, which I've thought about, and I've kind of learned along the way, because like you say, I've got 3 platforms at the moment. Things are working out pretty well for us. I have had other startups in the past which have completely failed. I've had businesses that we've sold and we've really lost money on. So, I've kind of, I started really young. So I've been doing this for like 16, 17 years now, since I was like 16 years old. And, I'm in my early 30s now. And as I say, I throughout my 20s, I was starting businesses and playing around with different ideas. So I think, firstly, that when I look back when I first started out, the main mistake I was making then was like I wanted this success overnight. You know, I was like just at university, and I was kind of really hungry for money, and I was like, I just need it to, sort of to be successful, and that's kind of really what I was fixated on. And of course, you've got to work at things. Sometimes you've got to work really hard, and sometimes things don't always happen instantly. So you've got to really persevere. But I think that was the mistake I made, certainly when I was at university. I was sort of expecting this overnight success. It didn't necessarily come. Next, I say, don't get into something boring. Like one of the companies I had a few years back was CDN, which is like content delivery network. This was one of those projects that I got into, which I thought was, you know, there was an opportunity there, but it wasn't the most interesting of businesses. And I think I struggled to really, you know, keep up enthusiasm for it. And also there was only so much we could do with it. I'm kind of quite a creative person. So when I bring products to market, I like something that I can kind of evolve and work on over time. And this was more about, you know, providing service and infrastructure to businesses. So I'd say, you know, don't get into something boring. You need to make sure that you're following your passion to begin with, at least. And then I think, you know, another mistake I've made in the past is launching a project which is too much based on passion. You don't have a clear enough way of monetization.
Yeah.
So I think when you launch a business, you've always got to have a good idea of how you're going to actually make some money from it.
Yeah. Only passion. There are so many passionate people who are broke. You know, my mentor Alex Mundosian says, you know, that's good. So some linkage to a monetization, and you want to see where it will get. Eventually, it will get monetized. You know,
you've got to have a balance between something that you're really, you know, you enjoy doing. You've got enough kind of, you know, it comes from the heart, but also you've got to put your business hat on sometimes and think, okay, how are you actually going to make some money from this thing? And if you've got a good idea of how you can make money from the beginning, and you enjoy doing it, then I think, you know, that kind of working on it and sort of making it evolve and sort of growing it to a certain level is much more enjoyable.
Wonderful. James, you mentioned about some, you know, you alluded one of the kind of mistake in this one. So I'm going to ask one little more blunt question, if you give me the permission to do this.
Yes.
So what's your single most professional failure you had in one of those transactions or ventures, and what did you learn from it, and how did you recover from it? That's the key part.
Well, I mean, I think it's a tricky question, sort of single most professional failure. I think there's been, you know, there's a project I launched a couple of years ago, and it was more of a passion project. As I mentioned, we didn't have a clear idea of how to monetize it, and I think now I look back on it, I went all in, right? So I spent a lot of money on this business, you know, invested a lot into it from the get-go. In retrospect, it might have been a better idea to test it on a lower budget to begin with. So I hired 6 full-time staff to work on this business. I spent a lot of money on assets. So actually, you know, fitting out a studio, we built a radio station and had this equipment and everything in it. And, you know, we spent a lot on the branding. The whole thing was just like, let's just throw lots of money at this and make everything the best it can possibly be. But I didn't really know exactly how I was going to monetize this project. And we built an audience, but then 2-3 years down the line, it was kind of costing lots to run, and we still weren't really generating very much return from it. Now I look back on it, I think maybe we should have had a little bit of more of a slow and steady start. So rather than chucking lots of money in it from the beginning, it would have been a good idea to sort of spend less and kind of validate the idea a bit more. Interestingly, with Matchmaker, fast forward to now, like, this is exactly what we did. We launched Matchmaker initially as like an MVP. It started life as we had an existing podcasting business, podcast.co. We decided that it would be an interesting kind of test marketing funnel to create 2 landing pages, one aimed at podcasters who were looking for guests and one aimed at professionals who were looking to be featured on podcasts, you know, to be as guests. So we just create 2 Google Forms. That was it. That was how Matchmaker started life. We didn't really spend any money on it, and we soon realized that there was like a clear demand to kind of connect these 2 groups of people together, but we didn't actually have a way of connecting them together. So we did validate the idea initially, and then it was time to, okay, let's invest in this, and we'll obviously need to spend money. We need to create this product, which obviously takes time and money, development costs, etc. So I'd say that was kind of before I used to sort of test ideas, and then I kind of thought, okay, when the businesses started doing better, you could kind of spend a bit more. So I think, like, going back to that sort of idea of of just really starting from the basics and not investing too much to prove your idea to begin with is always really powerful, I think.
Wonderful, wonderful. This is good. So we are live with James Mulvany. You are welcome to send your questions to wherever you're watching. Write comment or send me direct message. So I will try to see how, if the quality good one, I'm sure I love to include that one. So James, uh, enough about failures and lessons. So let's
Yeah.
just switch the side about what are your top three success secrets, and combined from coming from all different three platforms.
Okay, I mean, I think firstly, I don't know if there's any secret to success. I think everyone's got their own different like way of approaching it. I have like three kind of commandments that I like to run my business by, and these have always served me pretty well. So I think number one, don't mess around. Sometimes people fail because there's no sense of urgency. So if you spend sort of too much time thinking about pointless stuff, like a lot of people when they start their business, they'll like design the business cards and they'll be, building the website, or they'll just spend a long time building a product that no one else has seen. I think ultimately, you've got to go out there and sort of start selling and making sure that there's a demand for it. But actually, just don't worry too much about making everything perfect from the get-go, because you can kind of change it as you go along. So that's number one. I think second would be just persevere. Like sometimes, as I mentioned before, sometimes I used to want overnight success, but actually too many people these days, just because of how the internet works, I think they want results instantly, but it doesn't always work like that. It doesn't matter if you're focusing on growing a social media presence or building a website. You've got to wait for it to rank on Google. Sometimes you've got to just stick at things, and ultimately just kind of like persevere. You've got to just get to work and make it happen, especially when you're starting out as an entrepreneur. You don't have a team around you. You've just got to work really hard at it, and then number three is, which is my favorite, is always be single-minded. If you sometimes want to do something, you stick to your plan. You've just got to have that determination. That has to come from up here. So if you spend all your time like worrying about what other people think of you, or what your competition is doing, then ultimately you're kind of setting yourself up to fail. Sometimes competition isn't a bad thing. It's it's proof that there's already a market and there's money there. But competitors always exist. But I see a lot of people who get really caught up in, what's the competition doing? Every single day they're looking at the competition, or they're just kind of scared about what other people think of them when they're starting out. So those are kind of like my three, I'd say, pieces of advice to someone looking to get started really in business and try and achieve success.
Wonderful. Yeah. So especially the last one, I like it. We always think about other people have a perception about us.
Yes.
So be focused.
Yes.
Exactly
Single-minded focus. Yeah. Whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. James, I like it. I'm sure you have so many. Maybe you want to give some like a bonus.
I haven't got anything let's think of what else. So I think also just getting started. Like it kind of goes back to the first point, but like sometimes people think about things and try and like put things off, but actually just getting started and taking those first few steps, they're always really important.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, definitely getting
That's
started.
the trick to it.
So, James, now you have the experience of at least what we shared, at least three platforms which we know publicly, probably many others which we don't know. So if you have to do something all over again, based on what's available and type of internet and everything is available right now, what would be your high-level process of identifying a market, launching, building a product, selling first, or whatever? So what's the kind of checklist of high level?
High level. So I think, firstly, you've got to try and, like, one of the mistakes we made when we launched radio.co was we put a website up and it just said radio.co coming soon. Enter your name and email. We didn't really give any information about the product, and we didn't really spend any time actually creating the brand. So then when we launched that platform, we then had to probably wait for another year before all of our content started ranking on Google. So I would say if you're thinking about doing something, just start creating content. Even if it doesn't have to be amazing, just try and start establishing a brand within the market. Even if you haven't got a product to sell, that work will take time anyway. So I'd say, firstly, if you're interested in entering a market, sort of be present in that market. Try and figure out a way of starting to establish yourself, even if, as I say, you haven't actually got a product yet. Secondly, you want to make sure that people are actually engaging. So make sure you've got some kind of feedback loop where people can say, yes, like this is what we did with Matchmaker. You know, we posted some content, we drove some traffic to that content, and we were checking that people were actually interested by getting to them to complete a form. You know, that's always a good indicator. And then also just try and design products that are simple and easy to use. Again, I think some people will overcomplicate things for no reason, or they'll get too fixated with trying to come up with every single feature under the sun for a platform, when actually just creating a product that kind of fulfills a very simple goal to begin with, and then expanding on that as time progresses is a good way forward. That's a very high level summary, I'd say, of how I sort of develop businesses now.
It's really good one, especially create a platform and start creating content. It takes time while you're working on the product itself. That at the end probably it will align together, you know.
And also, I think the good thing about doing that is you can answer a lot of questions you have along the way. So when you start creating content and asking people to engage with that content, sometimes people will ask questions and you think, oh, that's a really good idea. I hadn't even thought about that. Or you know, so it kind of helps you with the product development life cycle, if you like, by actually looking at the market and sort of finding out what questions that market has got, and trying to sort of create content around that.
Yeah,
Really
content
helps with that
around,
customer
and also
journey.
the features and the benefits of that product. You can use those words to say, oh wow, this is exactly what I was looking for, you know.
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose of a social media anyway. We are using it to just like bombard the promotions, not engaging people with very few people. So James, it's lovely. How we can support you, the growth hacking secrets community, people who are watching this now and in the future they will watch, how we can support James ventures, you know.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, go and check out Matchmaker. I mean, if you know, Siddique's obviously mentioned to me just before we came on. You know, he's spoken to over 2,000 people, and you know, you say having conversations has generated your business, and it's kind of made you, you know, helps with your networking, and you kind of learn a lot from the people you're speaking to as well. So, you know, if you're interested in growing a brand, being a guest on other shows like I am doing today, or hosting your own show is a fantastic way to do that. So go check out matchmaker.fm. And if you want to connect with me, go to jamesm.com/connect, and all my links are on there.
Okay, wonderful. So check out the matchmaker.fm. This is matchmaker for your business growth. Okay, so
Yes.
this is not for your personal
It's
matchmaking.
nothing to do with dating. We say it's like Tinder, but for podcasters. So, but yeah, it's a great way of networking with other professionals and meeting and searching out for people who are like Siddique, who are looking for guests to be interviewed.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So as we are about to wrap up, I like to ask this question to every guest who comes to get a kind of feedback for the show,
Yeah.
testimonial or review for the show. And here's my question: what would you say to your best friend about a growth hacking secret show, which you are on right now when I'm not there?
Well, I would say like Siddique is what has interviewed more people than I probably have ever met. Actually, like 2,000 interviews is really impressive. So I'd say you know, there's a huge back catalogue of content to get through. So go check it out.
Thank you so much for your shout out. What would you say as a final word?
Go out and prosper. You know, go out. I mean, there's so much opportunity around at the moment, and obviously with the last couple of years, there's been a lot of doom and gloom. But you just try and stay positive and try and find something that's gonna you know, change the world or help other people.
Wonderful. Stay positive. That's my last word. And so you can stay positive by going on matchmaker.fm and get your desired podcast, the positive ones. You listen
Yes.
to them. That will help you to stay positive, really
Oh
consistent,
yeah,
long term basis.
100%.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much for James for sharing your wisdom with us today on the behalf of a growth hacking secrets community and our entire team. We really appreciate you. This
Thank
is
you very much,
Muhammad
Siddique.
Siddique signing off from Atlanta, Georgia. Until the next episode, all good wishes.
Thank you.